took criminal justice classes in high school. And what did they cover? Okay. So getting back, here are about that. So anyway, there's this expression, symbolic interactions. And basically what it's talking about is we have all kinds of relationships day to day in our society. This is a sociological theory. And assaults and homicides are part of these relationships that take place in social situations. Social situations could be a bar, could be a party, could be a sporting event. And, there's enough stuff on YouTube, you can find violence at any type of event in society, essentially, even at your church. And what's important to understand is the theory of routine activities theory. Routine activities theory plays a very important role in studying homicide because basically it determines where two people that are going to be the perpetrator and the victim are going to meet up. So what are the routine activities? Well, during the day, if you're young, you're at school. So routine activities theory will tell me that you're going to get assaulted at school or you're going to assault someone at school. If it's the weekend, routine activities will tell me that it's going out and enjoying yourself. Routine activities theory tells me that if I'm going to be a school shooter, I'm not going to do it in the summer. There's no one in school. It's a routine activities theory. If I'm going to be a movie shooter, I'm not going to go to Kevin Costner's Western because there won't be anybody there. I'm going to go to, like a stupid superhero movie where there's a million people there because I know there'll be lots of people there. But that's routine activities theory, knowing where everybody is at a particular time. We don't think about this, but if you do think about it, basically, you know where you're going at night. You know where you're going during the day, and kind of know what to expect. But expect the unexpected. You're in a pool hall and someone throws a bottle at someone and he ducks and hits you in the face and cuts you all up. Don't be shocked. These things happen at night. Nothing good happens in a pool hall after 10 o'clock at night. Does anybody shoot pool anymore? Okay. People, do they have pool tables in bars anymore?
Yeah. Like a lot of bars will have a free pool night on like the slow nights. So like I think Shenanigans, it's like Tuesday or Wednesday. So like that's when my buddies and I will just go out and.
How about darts?
Well, it's more electronic darts these days. I haven't seen a lot of actual dart bars.
Okay.
They're still popular.
Yeah, I don't think darts and drinking go well together, to be honest with you.
What, you mean getting drunk and throwing needles isn't any safer than lawn darts?
Right. Is that his butt or his head? But in any case, when we're talking about violent interactions and symbolic interactionism, these are places where these activities occur. And what we're looking at is what are the behavior of the witnesses? What are the behaviors of the bystanders? Do they try and intervene or not? Sometimes when you try and intervene, you become the victim. Sometimes when you intervene, you become the perpetrator. You're working, security at a place, and you end up shoving somebody, out the door, and they land and hit their head and die. That was unexpected, but these things happen. So what do? You wear football helmets when you go to bars. So anyway, it's all dealing with situational issues. What is the situation? When there's lots of people somewhere, you never have enough security. And the only thing you can really rely on are civilized people in the audience. So looking at violent interactions, there's two types of violent interactions, essentially. One is called instrumental. And this is typically done, where you have the plan to commit a crime. And it could be a robbery, it could be a burglary, but you have this plan ahead of time. And so basically you're conducting this plan with the possibility of making money. And quite often people use violence in order to get this money or property that they want. So when you think of instrumental murder and you're trying to find it in multiple choice or trying to put a false question, think about an instrument as being a gun or a knife. Okay, it's not done emotionally. That's a different type of violent interaction. We have expressive murder. These are often unplanned. They often are the acts of poor impulse control, rage, frustration, and typically caused by a conflict situation, such as an argument or a fight. So when you see this word expressive, think about, expressing your anger versus instrumental. These, helps you differentiate what the two are. Pretty straightforward, right? Anybody in here thinking of becoming a criminologist or sociologist? Criminalist? Forensic scientist? Movie star? We'll talk about that when we talk about stalking. So basically, I enjoy studying people. Some people, they get stuck at the airport between flights in 15 hours, they're ready to hang themselves. Myself, to me, it's a festival of insanity, just watching people, because people are so bizarre. I mean, I'm sure someone's watching me, it's just but the thing is that when you watch people, that's one way of being a sociologist. That's what sociologists do. And I don't consider myself a sociologist. But there's a certain development that takes place whenever there is a homicide transaction. What is the homicide transaction? This is the relationship between the perpetrator and the victim. So and you'll recognize all this. One particular criminologist or sociologist came up with this these 6 stages in a violent interaction. The victim does something offensive to the perpetrator. This marks the opening round of interaction that Luckenbill, who basically came up with this developmental pattern, he calls it a character contest. You say something to something, because the thing is, you can say one thing to one person and one thing to another, and they're both going to take it differently. So when this happens, one of them or both need to save face. Hey, you disrespected me. Yeah, you disrespected me. No, you disrespected me. So you get that type of insanity, which often takes place in a fight. But basically, you go from somebody saying something that's offensive to the next thing, the person has to save face. What am I going to do? We have lots of options. Lots of options. So the murderer might look at it one way. Sees the previous interaction as being very offensive. You're a bitch. You're a snitch. You're a this. You're a that. Words have a very powerful effect. I study prison gangs around the world, and in South America, you have some prison gangs where certain parts of language are never allowed to be used because they could be misconstrued for something else. So rather than talking about semen, they use the word vaquita, little cow, because you can't misunderstand what that's about. And so even in prison, they understand that what you say can have a lot of impact. And same thing in our society. So of course you have witnesses quite often, you have bystanders, and when the police come to deal with the situation, they give their interpretations. And they all might have a different interpretation of what happened. There's a famous Japanese movie called Rashomon. Anybody ever see that? It's not like the sequel of Batman or anything, Rashomon. Well, it's about a murder and a rape, and it's told from 3 different perspectives, the movie. It shows how 3 different people solved it. It's a classic Academy Award-winning film from the 1950s or so. And they've remade it as Westerners and things like that over the years. So you have different choices. Some people would rather retaliate. Like some stupid guy going and getting a brick and throwing it at a bunch of kids and hitting a parked car. That is, a very immature response. You can walk away. Walk away. Some people just cannot walk away. And they'll stew about it and stew about it. And then later on they'll do something about it. So you didn't have to do that murder, but it was your decision to make the choice that you made. It's kind of like when you play golf and you make a really bad golf shot, and you knew you were going to make it because you used the wrong club, and you thought you could make the green. Okay, well, I'd like to take another shot. Well, you get a mulligan sometimes if you're playing with friends, but you don't get a mulligan with murder. There's no mulligan. Unless you have really good witnesses that can vouch for it. So we have the person, the murderer, has decided what he's going to do or she's going to do. And she's going to, or he's going to confront that person. And next you have number 4, you have an interaction. And both of them see this as a confrontation. They both know what's going down. Obviously the victim, if he was smart or she was smart, they would have run away if they knew this guy was going to be murdered. But some people just, they see it as an even fight, right? And let's see where this goes. And just a little wrestling match or boxing match can lead to death, especially when you hit your head on concrete or something. So both people decided to engage in confrontation, which leads to the violence and leads to possible murder. So violence is used to solve the conflict in this development stages. The offender, who was the murderer, may decide to, maybe has a weapon, and they're most likely to grab that weapon if they have it on them, or they might see something on the ground, rather than hitting someone with your fist. Anybody ever hit anybody with your fist, like in the face or something like that? It hurts, both of you. You can break your knuckles and stuff. That's why I laugh at these movies where, you have the guy just pounding and stuff like that, and the guy's fist looks fine and all of that. We're not made of Jell-O. It hurts when you do that. Or they might leave the scene to get one. We see this happen in bars. You get kicked out of a bar because you're causing a ruckus. You go out to your car, get a gun, go in, say, I'm back. What do you do about it? And you shoot someone. All you have to do is read the Houston Chronicle on a Monday to get stories like that. Parking lots. Parking lots are some of the most dangerous places at night to be at. Whether it's the Walmart parking lot and all the, creatures hanging around there. Parking lots are, where abductions take place. Parking lots are where lots of violence takes place. So if you're looking for violence, it's a good place to hang out. So you have the final stage. You have the murderer. Murderer, do they usually flee? I think in most confrontational interactions like this, they probably hang around because they know, if there's witnesses. If it's just 2 people on the street, they're going to split. It's kind of like when you bump into a car in a parking lot, and do I leave a note or should I just go? It's very similar to that. They remain at the scene. Bystanders get involved and they hold them down. But it depends on the social context. Are you with, people that are like you? Are you with a gang? Are you with your buddies and that sort of thing? Or are you in a public space? And also, what's important, what's the relationship between the victim and the perpetrator? Quite often, they know each other, related to each other. They're not strangers. So we're talking about social interactionism. We're not talking about serial homicide, which is kind of stranger violence, which is much harder to solve, or stalking violence. These are another type, and we'll be looking at them in their own context. So I'm going to mention a couple of really well-known theorists that are worth remembering. One of them is a criminologist named Marvin Wolfgang, and he was one of the first to really study homicide in a particular city. He studied it in Philadelphia in the 1950s. And basically, he was one of the first to talk about the victim being an active participant in their own murder. That they've done something, but they didn't know that they were doing it. They pressed a button. They insulted, they didn't notice. One of my closest friends, I think being a close friend, it's important to be able to give them a hard time or to make fun of them and stuff like that, and then to handle it. But then there's some people that can't handle it, And this guy I've been friends with for all my life, my cousin, and he gets insulted at the slightest words. And if he was a tough guy, he'd be in prison for violence, for homicide. But Marvin Wolfgang was the first to suggest that the victim plays a part in their murder. And there's usually a question on the hand about that. There's a person named Polk, who you don't need to remember, but he calls these confrontational homicides. Now, if you went into the prison here and interviewed everybody and asked them, when they committed, you're talking to a murderer or somebody that committed a violent crime, ask them, were you under the influence of anything when you did that? Did you have too many drinks? Did you, have bad meth? Or did you have some type of drug which makes you, more stimulated? A lot of them would say yes. But then again, a lot of them, might not be able to know the difference because we have a lot of mentally ill people. Mental health is a very important thing that doesn't get addressed in prisons, unfortunately. And a large part of our population is mentally ill. When I say mentally ill, I'm not using it as a pejorative word. I'm just saying, that we live in a society of high anxiety and stress. Whether it's politics, whether it's one politician accusing another of eating dogs or whatever, just insanity, and people just get riled up. So let's look at alcohol. Alcohol obviously is seen as a problem. One of the things that I've noticed, it seems like students don't drink as much as they used to. Is that true? Well, you wouldn't know. Huh? What's that?
We can't afford alcohol.
We hang around 7-Eleven when people are coming in and asking to get you a beer or something. We used to do it when we were 12. But alcohol is obviously a problem with certain populations. In certain populations, it's not seen as a big deal being drunk. I used to teach at what was called ILEA, the International Law Enforcement Academy, in Roswell, New Mexico. The State Department has it there. And they would bring in cops from around the world, and police executives. They'd often come from like the stands, Tajikistan, Kazakhstan, all these places. They come from areas where they have a different type of policing than our democratic police system that we have. We're supposed to kind of try and change their mind about a lot of things. But they were constantly getting in trouble in Roswell for being drunk and trying to find prostitutes. And these are cops from these countries, and they end up sending them back home. So alcohol can make you make bad decisions. There's some research that says there's a link between murder and related offenses, sometimes alcohol. And so what we're talking about is, what does it do to your aggression? Well, one thing is for sure, is that alcohol does not cause violence, okay? It does not cause violence. What it does is it basically depends on who you are. Are you predisposed to be a violent person? Are you predisposed to be kind of a mellow person? This will determine how you react to alcohol. So it doesn't make kind of a peace-loving, laid-back person into a raging maniac. If this person already is a violent person, you know, this can cause them to go even further. And then all hell breaks out. Obviously, alcohol affects individuals differently. One of the famous stereotypes are of Native Americans being given alcohol during the Western movement because, you know, there really wasn't, you know, the hard liquor in the Native American environments, and that they didn't handle it well. The same thing could be said about a lot of Asian cultures. And remember, Asian cultures are connected to genetically to the Native American population. So perhaps there's something to that some people can. But, you know, for the most part, you know, people handle alcohol differently. It operates as a depressant on some people and as a stimulant as another. The stimulated person might go out and have some ass tonight. Depressed person, I think I'll go hang myself tonight. You know, so people react differently when they find this in their bloodstreams when they do the autopsies. You've heard the expression liquid courage. You know, drink a lot. That's how I get my courage. Testosterone by the glass. My brother used to have, my late brother, who's been gone a long time, he used to have a hat that said, instant asshole, it just said alcohol. And he would wear that hat. And it was very truthful. That's how it is. So, we have different cultural responses to drinking. Native Americans' first contact with alcohol did not result in mayhem. But then they started to see how the colonists and the European immigrants, how they reacted when they were on alcohol, which was not real well, and perhaps they learned from that. So they watched white settlers and drunken fights and learned it could reduce aggression and violence. And so they conformed their behavior at times. Now remember, this is all theoretical. We don't know for sure. You know, we're learning about the human brain and the human, biological system. We're learning more every day. There are certain cultures that will not accept this type of violence. If you, like, for instance, were one of the early colonists in America, and you moved to Massachusetts, which was a Puritan colony, and where basically the laws were determined by the Bible, you know, they would drink beer, that sort of thing, but you didn't have, the hard alcohol. You didn't have a lot of drunkenness because it was against the law, and you would be punished severely, even if you didn't hurt someone else. Now, if you're living in Virginia or Georgia at the same time period, you get away with it a little bit more because, the Bible didn't have as much influence. So the Bible can have an effect on behavior. A culture that really believes in their religious book, whether it's the Quran or the Talmud or the Bible. What would happen to you in, anybody here know about Islamic law at all? What do you think would happen to you if someone accused you of stealing a bottle of whiskey from someone, let's say Iran?
Like names of women?
What's that?
Like, are you not using the women? Like, what would happen?
Well, I'm cultural. No, I mean, what would happen to this person in their criminal justice system? How would they be punished?
Okay.
Or would they?
Do they talk about it?
Well, the thing is, if you look at the Quran, it doesn't mention whiskey. It mentions certain things that you get punished for. In fact, if you get caught stealing something, according to the Quran, and you can prove, like for instance, food or something like that, prove that you need sustenance, that you're not going to get punished the same way as if you're, just some dude that goes into a store to steal something. But, it's kind of like in America, okay? What would happen if some guy went to a police guy and said, well, he stole my crack? It's happened. Or they sold me crack. It's not crack. Watch the TV show Cops. There's episodes, where, it's hilarious. They should have an Emmy Award for acting and scripts for Cops, reality show. How many people in here have never been drunk? That's pretty amazing. Not making anything. I'm supposed to do sometimes illicit drugs, alcohol is a drug, but other types of drugs can result in violence. A lot of times people say that drug addiction is a victimless crime. That's not true at all, because, a drug addict quite often has to commit crimes in order to, keep their addiction going. Or you might be, a sex worker, and you need to do this work for, and you become a victim from that to, support your addiction. Violence can take place when there is a drug transaction. I mean, the old stereotype is the drug dealer on the corner, you knew where to go. Hey Bob, where can I get, some pot, or where can I get some crack? I'll just go down on this such and such a street, okay? And, okay, you might go there, but it's a very dangerous transaction to the dealer and to the person who's buying. So what's happened in recent years is the street drug dealers have kind of been replaced on the internet, especially the dark web. The dark web, you can order drugs, and I've never done it, because it's a process. You have to go through encryption and all this other crap. But they have like stars rated for each drug, like in Amazon. It's a wonderful book. I give it 5 stars. Someone buys fentanyl, give it 5 stars. He's alive. But the bottom line is that there's a lot of danger in a drug transaction. And a lot of it can be just as dangerous, the more anonymous it is. Psychoactive effects of drugs, where you hallucinate. One of the things in the study of serial killers you find is there's a whole variety of different serial killers, and those that are psychotic are most likely to be caught because they're very disorganized and, they make a mess. There's blood everywhere, they're walking down the street covered in blood, what? But basically, psychoactive drugs can have something to do with that. It can make you psychotic, at least temporarily. And then we have all these drugs, which are probably some of the most popular drugs in the world. PCP, angel dust, meth. You go to Asia, for instance, and drugs like meth and speed are very, very popular because you feel invulnerable. You also feel paranoid. You might be paranoid, and the person with you, maybe, for instance, is a police agent. But, being around people that are on drugs and people that are drunk, you just have to watch yourself because you don't know how they're going to behave. You ever hear the expression crank for meth? Well, this came from the outlaw motorcycle gangs used to be big meth dealers. They used to control a lot of meth dealing, and they would hide it in the crankcases in their machines, so that's where it came from. Others call it the Jenny Crank diet. And You know, there's always a question, how can I tell if my neighbor is a tweaker? They're mowing the lawn at 4 in the morning, you know, things like that, you know. But these types of drugs, you know, no matter the quality, are really, you know, really scary. Or the drugs you buy at the gas station. You know, they're flavored and this and that. You don't know what the hell you're getting. You're getting some type of chemical. So we look at illicit drugs. What kind of violent interactions do we have? Obviously, addiction is a big cause. The symptoms of withdrawal. I don't have it. I'm gonna get some money. I need some money for drugs. Oh, I'm gonna go rob a bank. Oh yeah, that's a great idea. Bank robbers always get caught. I mean, there's 2 crimes that are always reported: murder and bank robbery. 2 felonies that are always reported. And, you know, if you're gonna steal, learn how to use the internet, use the, you know, computers and bank fraud and that stuff. That's the way you do it these days. The illegal drug market, you've got competition on the streets that you need to get rid of. Or you've got a drug gang that's not paying its taxes. You're in the Mexican mafia, and the street gang members aren't paying their taxes on dealing in your territory. You see lots of violence that comes around from that. So we see a lot of these violent interactions linked to homicide and trafficking. This takes place in prison as well. You know, there's people that go to prison that never did drugs and become drug addicts in prison. What does that tell you? You know, about, you know, our correctional system. We see crime going down, but populations in prison still going up. What's that all about? So there's a lot of hypocrisy that takes place in our criminal justice system. You know, I can't fix it, so I'm not going to try, but it's good to know about that when you make presumptions about people that are in prison, people that have a prison background. It doesn't, you know, you can't really judge them. So if you're looking at sources of violence in the illegal drug business, a lot of it depends on the harvesting season. Protection of drug-producing crops during harvest season. We see sometimes crime related to in farming communities, like burglary, affected by the farming season. You know, when are you out cutting down the crops? When are you home in the winter not doing it? These are times when, you know, determine when we have different crime rates. Failing to pay debts. Lots of people go into debt, you know, buying drugs. They have no idea how they're going to pay it back. But one thing in prison, one of the codes of the convict is you pay your debts. That's why they don't like gambling in prisons and things like that, because it often creates debts. Because if you know somebody that's a hard, you know, addicted to gambling, you know, they always need money. Anybody know anybody that makes a living as a gambler? You do? Who's that? Your uncle? What does he do? What does he play?
You just go and just support evidence in North Texas and drive us over this place that's called
What does he play?
Where?
What does he play?
Mostly tables.
Like poker,
Yeah.
blackjack?
Poker.
Yeah. And, you know, are you sure he makes a living at it?
He makes a living out of it.
Yeah. But, you know, the thing is that, you know, nobody comes back a loser from Vegas, for instance. I want a fortune. Or at least when they go there, they're not going to lose. And it's funny watching the plane going. Everybody's excited. They're going to be making a fortune. And it's so quiet on the way back. You got husbands yelling at wives and wives yelling at husbands. Why did you, you know, bet the kid on that? Why did you bet the house on that? You know, that sort of thing. I mean, you know, I'm not a degenerate gambler, but I like to play poker. And that's different. But you can't really make a living as a poker player unless you're really at the highest levels. If you ever go to Vegas and play poker, they take a rake of the pot. Nice big pot, disappears something. You know, so the only one really making out is, you know, is the casino. Punishment for stealing, tampering, sharing drug supplies. You see this even in crack houses. There's rules in crack houses on the wall. Don't do the product. Don't let your friends hang out. Selling poor quality drugs or fake drugs. You know, no addict likes that. We'll be back to the real stuff. So the bottom line is, what are we doing about alcohol and drugs? We're doing more alcohol, we're doing more drugs. Well, they're legalizing some drugs, you know, like marijuana. You know, when I was growing up, you know, you went to jail, you know, for marijuana or you sold marijuana. You know, nowadays you go to states, and when you're leaving the state, you're told to put any marijuana that you have into this disposal unit before you get on your airplane to go back home. I mean, it's, you know, completely, you know, almost science fiction if you look at this from the 1960s. But throughout our history, drugs have mostly been legal, any type of drug, especially opiates. For most of American history or the world's history, you know, opiates were the solution to anything. You want to feel, because when you go to the doctor, you want to feel good. And what does it better than an opiate? So you had a kid that was crying all the time. They made medicine for that kid that had opiates in it. Shut him up for a while, for a long while. And anybody that's ever had a child, a screaming child, would know, God, I wish I had some of that. But in any case, in 1914, we see the first drug legislation. We see the Harrison Narcotic Act. And this is when the drug war, so to speak, began, where any type of hard drug, essentially, that was related to opiates was made illegal to purchase unless you bought it under a tax plan. I'm not going to get into it. So here we have 1914. Before that, if I got a Sears catalog, everybody knows what Sears used to be, right? A big chain. They used to put out the catalog, and you could buy cocaine in it. You could get wine laced with cocaine. You could get your works, you know, the needle and the whole kit out of the Sears catalog. You look back to the old Sears catalogs from like the early 1900s, and all these pictures are in there. You have advertisements by the Pope and famous people saying how much energy cocaine gave them, you know. So, you know, times change, the way we look at drugs change, and a lot of it is a form of social control. Because, you know, a lot of it is people at the top of our society is trying to control the population. How you feel, what you do. We need to control you. So in 1914, we start making it a federal crime. Before 1914, there weren't many federal crimes. That's why there was no FBI. Okay? Now we have many more federal crimes. Then we have a new federal crime in 1919, 1920, the 18th Amendment, otherwise known as what? Prohibition, alcohol prohibition. Probably the only country outside the Muslim world that was prohibiting alcohol sales and distribution. And for almost 13 years, it was illegal to buy alcohol. Did people drink? Of course they did. And what this did, it had the unintended consequences of making people drink stronger booze. Up until that time, people mostly drank beer. But you feel like, well, if I'm going to get busted for beer, I might as well get busted for a higher level of alcohol. So you went to speakeasies and these underground, you know, bars, which were everywhere, even probably around here. Probably still exists, you know, where can I get some moonshine? You know, that sort of thing. But people started drinking, you know, stronger drinks. And this is when we see the popularity of a mixed drink, with the flavors. Because the alcohol they were using, a lot of it was unadulterated, a lot of it was poisonous. And so to get or make it sick, so to make it palatable, you put like a caramel in it, put caramel color, some type of, you know, sweet, you know, stuff in it. And Mixed drinks became really popular. So what happens is we see, in some cases, cirrhosis of the liver going up. In other cases, we see it going down, people that, just stop drinking. We see domestic violence going down during Prohibition to a great degree. But, Prohibition is what created modern organized crime. If you look at modern organized crime, like the stereotype of the mafia and all this other stuff, it got people to not trust the government because the Prohibition agents were mostly corrupt. And it also, basically, gave a way for, organizing, making money that had never existed before. Huge amount of money. You look at the Kennedy family, the royalty of America. They made a lot of their money in Prohibition. The old man, John F. Kennedy's father, made a lot of money. And what he did is he stocked up on Seagrams. And, when Prohibition ended, he had this incredible stock to sell. Anyways, so we have the 18th Amendment, national prohibition, and then how about pot? It wasn't until 1937 that marijuana became legal. Now, when we look at these types of things that are being made illegal, marijuana, we're looking at cocaine, things like that, opium, they're often targeted at marginalized populations. For instance, if we look at the opium trade, opium dens, who do we associate with? Which ethnic group do we associate with that? Chinese, Asians, and this was a time period when, you had people coming from China taking jobs. We hear about immigration. There's always been this nonsense. So the Irish Catholics are coming in and taking all the jobs. The Chinese are coming, and now, it's something else. But it was targeting a specific population to a great extent. Marijuana, you had a lot of Hispanic immigrants in the 1930s and 40s. During World War II, since a lot of people were overseas fighting, you had them coming up in the Bracero program and working in the fields. And when they kicked back, they didn't kick back with a bud. Well, they did, kind of a bud. But they would, smoke a joint rather than a beer. And so let's target them. Let's make it illegal. Cocaine was targeted towards African Americans. It made them, super sexual, hypersexual. But if you look at all of the publicity from this era, if you look at all the commentary, you can see who this is directed. And now, we're much more sophisticated about all of this stuff. And it's interesting just looking back, at how all of this has changed. Say something else? Just as a lesson, if you need to leave early, tell me. Everybody sign the roll sheet?